Before we begin, if you're listening to this alone at night, you're exactly where you should be. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more true horror stories, disturbing encounters, and unexplained events uploaded every day. Now lock your doors, turn off the lights, and let's get into tonight's stories. Hospitals never really sleep. At 3 a.m, patients are still arriving. Monitors are still beeping. Doctors are still making rounds. Most people think hospitals become quieter after midnight. They do, but they never become silent. I worked overnight maintenance at a regional hospital for almost 4 years. I knew every hallway, every mechanical room, every elevator, or at least, I thought I did, until one Tuesday morning. The service elevator stopped on a floor that wasn't listed anywhere in the building. The display simply read, 13. The problem was, our hospital didn't have a 13th floor. The buttons skipped directly from 12 to 14. And yet, the doors still opened. This happened during the winter of 2024. I worked the overnight maintenance shift at a large hospital outside Minneapolis. My shift ran from 11 p.m. until 7 a.m. Most of my work happened after visiting hours ended. Repair automatic doors, replace ceiling lights, reset medical gas alarms, quiet jobs that wouldn't disturb patients. The service elevators were reserved for staff. Patients almost never used them. They connected every maintenance level in the building. I'd ridden them hundreds of times. Never once had they behaved strangely. Around 2:18 a.m., I loaded a cart with replacement ceiling tiles. Pressed floor 8. The doors closed. The elevator climbed normally. 3, 5, 7, 9. Then, instead of stopping, it continued upward. 10, 11, 12. The display flickered. The elevator slowed. Stopped. The doors opened. A cold draft rolled inside. Beyond the doorway stretched a brightly lit hospital corridor. Freshly polished floors. White walls. Patient rooms lining both sides. Everything looked spotless. Almost. Too spotless. No conversations. No rolling carts. No overhead announcements. No monitor alarms. Nothing. Hospitals are never that quiet. I stepped into the hallway. The elevator doors remained open behind me. Waiting. Every patient room door stood closed. Small brass room numbers lined the walls. Only odd numbers. A nurse slowly emerged from the far end of the corridor. Perfectly pressed white uniform. Old-fashioned nurse's cap. The kind hospitals stopped using decades ago. She smiled politely. Maintenance finally made it. I think I'm on the wrong floor. She tilted her head. No, you arrived exactly when you were scheduled. Something about the sentence made my stomach tighten. I reached for my radio. Only static answered. No matter which channel I selected. The nurse gestured toward room 1313. They're waiting. I don't think so. She smiled again. Not offended. Almost. Sympathetic. You always say that. Every instinct told me to leave. I backed toward the elevator, never taking my eyes off her. As I stepped inside, every patient room door quietly opened. Beds lined each room. Every bed occupied. Patients rested perfectly still beneath white sheets. Then, one by one, they all turned their heads toward me. Not their bodies, only their heads. The elevator doors closed. Seconds later, they opened onto the real 8th floor. The normal sounds returned immediately. Phones ringing. Footsteps. Voices. Everything ordinary again. I stood frozen inside the elevator. The maintenance cart remained exactly where I'd left it. Except, one item rested on top. A patient identification wristband. Printed across it, in faded black lettering, was my full name. Admission time, 2:18 a.m. Room. I tore the band off. Dropped it into a trash bin. The next morning, I asked one of the oldest hospital engineers whether the building had ever included a 13th floor. He quietly asked, "The service elevator?" I hadn't mentioned it. He sighed. During the hospital's original design, architects had numbered a temporary construction level as floor 13. Once the hospital opened, the level was permanently sealed and removed from public plans. Officially, floor 13 had never existed. Mostly, over the following weeks, the elevator occasionally hesitated after floor 12, only for a second, then continued normally. No one else admitted seeing it. Until one night, an ICU nurse approached me in the cafeteria. Without sitting down, she asked, "If the elevator ever stops on 13. She looked directly into my eyes. "Don't answer anyone who knows your name." I asked her how she knew. She simply stood up, threw away her coffee, walked out. Near the end of my employment, the hospital shut down the service elevator for modernization. New controls, new motors, new wiring, everything replaced. During demolition, workers opened an old maintenance wall behind the elevator shaft. Hidden inside, they discovered a forgotten call button, covered in dust, disconnected for decades. The small metal plate beneath it carried only one engraving, 13. No blueprints listed it. No maintenance records mentioned it. I transferred to another hospital shortly afterward. Different city, different building, different elevators. Almost a year later, I visited a friend recovering from surgery. As I left, I stepped into a service elevator by mistake, pressed the lobby. The doors closed. Hospital phones ring constantly. Doctors, pharmacies, patient rooms, emergency calls. After a while, you stop paying attention to the sound. It's just part of the job. I worked the overnight shift as a unit secretary on the 4th floor of a regional hospital. One of my responsibilities was answering every patient room call. Most patients wanted water, pain medication, another blanket, simple requests. Then room 214 started calling. Every night, exactly 2:14 a.m. Always one ring. Always the same extension. The strange part wasn't the phone call. It was that room 214 hadn't had a patient in it for almost 6 years. This happened during the spring of 2023. I worked on the overnight medical surgical floor at a hospital in Ohio. My shift ran from 11 p.m. until 7 a.m. After visiting hours ended, the floor became surprisingly quiet. Nurses completed medication rounds. Cleaning crews polished the hallways. Monitors beeped softly in the background. Nothing unusual. On my second week, at exactly 2:14 a.m., the call light panel lit up. Room 214. I answered immediately. 4th floor nurses station. Silence. No breathing. No static. Nothing. After about 10 seconds, the line disconnected. I assumed it was a wiring issue. Reasonable enough. At least initially. I mentioned it to the charge nurse. She looked toward the hallway, then quietly replied, "Just ignore it." That answer surprised me. Hospital policy required every patient call to be investigated. I asked why. She simply said, "There's nobody in there." The following night, 2:14, the phone rang again. Room 214. Again, only silence. This continued every night. Always the same time. Always the same room. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. Instead of answering, I walked to room 214 before the phone stopped ringing. The hallway lights remained dim. The room sat at the very end of the corridor. Its door stayed closed. A small sign read, "Out of service." The call light above the door glowed red. Someone inside had pressed the call button. I opened the door. The room was empty. No bed, no equipment, no furniture, only bare walls and a sealed window. The call light immediately went dark. When I returned to the nurse's station, the phone began ringing again. Room 214. My stomach tightened. Weeks passed. The strange calls continued. No one seemed surprised anymore. New employees always asked about them. Older staff always gave the same answer. Ignore it. One rainy evening, the hospital temporarily lost power. Emergency generators activated within seconds. Most patient rooms returned to normal, except room 214. Its call light remained on continuously. Maintenance checked the wiring. No electrical fault. No connected phone. No active call button. Officially, the room couldn't make calls. Mostly. One night, I answered just before the line disconnected. This time, I heard something. Very faint. A man's voice. "Hello." Barely louder than a whisper. "I think." Long pause. "They forgot me." The line went dead. Every hair on my arm stood up. The following morning, I asked one of the hospital's oldest nurses whether room 214 had ever been a patient room. She quietly asked, "Did he finally speak?" I hadn't mentioned the voice. She looked down at her coffee. Years earlier, Before the floor was renovated, room 214 had been an ordinary patient room. During construction, the room was permanently closed, converted into storage, then emptied completely. Officially, because of plumbing problems. Mostly. One night, around 2:10, I decided to wait inside the empty room. The lights hummed softly overhead. The bare walls reflected the emergency exit sign from the hallway. Nothing else. At exactly 2:14, a bedside phone began ringing. There wasn't a phone in the room, yet the sound echoed beside me. Ring. Pause. Ring. I couldn't see it, but I could hear it. Then, a second sound. A heart monitor. Slow. Steady. Beep. 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 The room suddenly felt occupied. The faint smell of antiseptic filled the air. A voice quietly spoke from somewhere beside the empty wall. "Nurse?" I froze. "I've been pressing the button." "I know," I whispered without thinking. There was a long silence. Then, "Thank you." The beeping stopped. The ringing stopped. The room became silent again. When I stepped into the hallway, every nurse stared at me. The charge nurse looked pale. She quietly asked, "Who were you talking to?" I couldn't answer. The next evening, 2:14 came and went. No phone call. The following night, still nothing. For almost 3 months, room 214 remained silent. Then the hospital announced another renovation. The sealed room would finally be demolished. Construction workers removed the drywall. People rarely notice hospital janitors. Patients are focused on recovery. Doctors are focused on treatment. Nurses are focused on their rounds. Cleaning staff quietly move from room to room, long after most visitors have gone home. For almost 6 years, I worked the overnight cleaning shift in a large city hospital. I knew every hallway, every supply closet, every shortcut through the building. After enough nights, you start recognizing familiar faces. Security guards, respiratory therapists, night nurses. Then I started seeing the same patient. Every night, different floors, different wings, always walking alone. The strange part wasn't that he kept appearing. It was that, according to every patient chart, he had never been admitted. This happened during the fall of 2023. My shift started at 10:30 p.m. and ended at 7 a.m. I cleaned waiting rooms, operating suites, hallways, and empty patient rooms. The hospital never truly slept. Even at 3 in the morning, someone was always awake. Around 1 a.m. one Tuesday, I noticed a man walking slowly through the surgical wing. He wore a pale blue hospital gown, white socks, an identification wristband. His head remained lowered. His hands rested calmly at his sides. Nothing unusual. Confused patients occasionally wandered away from their rooms. I smiled. "Sir?" No response. "I can help you find your room." He kept walking, turned the corner, disappeared. I followed immediately. The hallway beyond was empty. No doors had opened. No elevators had arrived. Nothing. Reasonable explanation? I'd simply lost sight of him, at least initially. The following night, I saw him again. Different floor. Same hospital gown. Same slow pace. Again, he vanished after turning one corner. Security reviewed the cameras. Nobody appeared on the recording. Only me, walking after someone who wasn't there. My supervisor suggested exhaustion. Night shifts can play tricks on people. Reasonable enough. Mostly. A week later, I emptied the trash in an unused recovery room. When I returned to my cleaning cart, a hospital wristband rested on top of the supplies. No name. No room number. Only one printed line. Status, waiting. I assumed another employee had left it there as a joke. I threw it away. The next morning, another wristband appeared. Same wording. Same blank patient information. This continued almost every shift. One wristband. Every morning. Always inside my cleaning cart. No cameras ever showed anyone placing them there. One evening, I mentioned the strange patient to an older security officer. He quietly asked, "Does he ever look at you?" I hadn't mentioned that. No, he never did. The guard nodded, then looked away. Years earlier, before electronic records, staff occasionally reported seeing a patient wandering after midnight. Always alone, always wearing a blank wristband. Whenever someone tried to approach him, He disappeared around the next corner. Officially, those reports were never investigated. Mostly, near Christmas, a water pipe burst in one section of the hospital. Maintenance temporarily shut down an older wing. No patients remained there, only empty rooms awaiting renovation. Around 2:40 a.m., I cleaned the abandoned hallway. At the far end, I saw him again, standing completely still, facing a patient room. For the first time, he slowly turned toward me. His face looked ordinary, tired, pale, expressionless. Then, he quietly raised one hand, not waving, pointing, toward room 617. The room had been empty for months. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened the door. Inside sat an untouched hospital bed, a bedside table, an unplugged heart monitor. Nothing unusual. Then I noticed the patient whiteboard. Written neatly across it, in fresh black marker, were 3 words: "Room not ready." Behind me, the hallway fell silent. I stepped back outside. The patient was gone. Only one new wristband lay on the floor where he'd been standing. This one contained different text. "Room ready." A cold chill ran through me. The next morning, maintenance workers began removing old cabinets from room 617. Hidden behind one wall, they discovered an original patient chart cabinet sealed during an earlier renovation. Inside rested dozens of paper files. Most were damaged beyond recognition. One remained readable. The admission page listed no patient name, no age, no diagnosis. Only one handwritten note appeared across the top. Awaiting transfer. No discharge paperwork followed. No further records existed. The file simply ended. A few weeks before I left that job, I worked one final overnight shift. Around 6:45 a.m., the first rays of sunlight entered the hospital lobby. Visitors began arriving. Morning staff filled the corridors. Everything felt normal again. As I pushed my cleaning cart toward the storage room, I noticed someone standing beside the exit doors. The same patient. For the first time, he smiled, very slightly. Then he walked through the automatic doors. Without them opening, he disappeared into the morning light. When I reached my cart, there wasn't another wristband waiting. There never was again. Months later, I visited the hospital to see a family member recovering from surgery. The building had been renovated. New flooring, fresh paint, modern equipment. Everything looked brighter. While waiting for the elevator, I noticed a framed photograph displaying hospital employees from decades earlier. Doctors, nurses, maintenance workers.